think. Is everybody better in our family? Well, Dacey's not better, but Tally's over his COVID. How are we coming up there, Tally? If you notice in the back, we have 2 cameras instead of 1. Somebody donated a second camera so they could get a side view as I'm preaching. I'm good? All right. Get the PowerPoint going. And I'll read a passage from the book of Luke, chapter 12, beginning in verse 22. And he said to his disciples, "For this reason I say to you, do not worry about your life as to what you will eat, nor your body as to what you will put on. For life is more than food, and body is more than clothing. Consider the ravens. They neither sow nor reap. They have no storeroom or barn, yet God feeds them. How much more valuable you are than those birds? And which of you by worrying can add a single hour to your lifespan? If then you cannot do even a very little thing, why do you worry about other matters? Consider the lilies, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin. But I tell you, even Solomon in all his glory clothed himself not like one of these. But if God so clothes the grass of the field, which is alive today and tomorrow is thrown into the furnace, how much more will he clothe you, you people of little faith? And do not seek what you will eat and what you will drink, and do not keep worrying. For all these things the nations of the world eagerly seek, but your Father knows that you need these things. But seek his kingdom, and these things will be added to you. Do not be afraid, little flock, for your Father has chosen to gladly give you the kingdom. Sell your possessions and give to charity. Make yourselves money belts which do not wear out, and an unfailing treasure in heaven where no thief comes near, nor a moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." So I'm calling this sermon Crows and Lilies. Go ahead there, please. So let's look at the first verse. He said to his disciples, "Therefore I tell you, do not worry." That's the center theme of this whole passage, worry. Do you ever worry? Most of the things that I worry about never happen. I think this bad thing is going to happen, that bad thing is going to happen, and then it never happens. Nine times out of 10, it never happens. Sometimes it happens. I'm all set. Are you, like at the game, are you passing them out? Beer? The first thing it says is, do not worry about your life. Just a casual reading of this, you would think it's talking about food and clothing, but it's talking about our life. Do you ever have a near-death experience? I don't know what year it was. What year did I get in that accident? 2002, maybe? Yeah, the head-on collision, yeah. I tried to find a picture of the car to scare you, but I was driving up through Reed Corners, and there's this great big huge truck, with the 4 doors and the jacked up and everything, and I'm flying through. The cop said I might have been going a little bit over the speed limit. He suggested that was possible, and it's 45 through there, and this big truck turned in front of me. And the only thing that went through my mind was, I hope I don't die. And the crash happened. It completely totaled my convertible. And I hit my head on the bow. The top was down. And this lady in the car next to me got out and she said, "Are you okay?" And she looked at me. She said, "Oh, no, you're not." And that wasn't very encouraging to me. but I had a big cut on my head, and you know when you get a cut on your head, it bleeds like anything. So my whole face was covered with blood. Another time I was on a Boeing 767 in Frankfurt, Germany. And I don't know if you've ever been on one of those big jumbo jets or not, but they take forever to take off. You know, you get on a 737 or 727 out of Rochester or one of those Canadair regional jets and phew, it comes right off the runway. But those things go and go and go and go and go. And we got just to the point, because I've been on them many times, just at the point where I knew that it would be time to take off, and all of a sudden they slammed it in reverse and stopped it. And the guy next to me, who I obviously didn't know, he said, well, you know, you just get fatalistic about these things. In other words, if we're going to die, you know, nothing to worry about at that point, because if you're going to die, you're going to die. And so Jesus is talking in the previous verses about persecution that is coming to the disciples, and you know, people are not going to accept Christianity too easily. In fact, they are about to crucify Jesus in Jerusalem in a couple of weeks from now. And he's talking to his disciples, those people who have been with him for the 3-year duration or thereabouts. And he says, don't worry about your life. You know, a number of years ago, I came up with this mole on my arm, and it was one of those moles that had different colors, which is, you know, the warning sign for malignant melanoma. And so I went to the doctor, and he said, oh yeah, that's got to come off. And so he got a scalpel, and he cut it right off. I said, can't you cut it off deeper than that? And he said, no, I'm going to just test it. And I said, well, why don't you just get it out of there? Well, it turned out that, obviously, since I'm still here with you, that it didn't turn out to be malignant melanoma, but those 10 days or whatever it was scary. And nothing really seemed to matter at that point. You know, it didn't matter how much money I had in the bank or what vehicles I owned or where my house was or anything like that, because I thought, you know, I could be gone in 6 months from now. And that was also true of the disciples, but they could be gone 6 months from then, you know, due to persecution. And he said to them, don't worry about your life. Then he says, what you will eat, or about your body, what you will wear. Now, I want to point out here that there's a whole nother volume of scripture that says you should, you know, get up in the morning, go to work, take care of yourself, pay your bills, all, you know, there's all kinds of that kind of teaching in the Bible. So I want to point out that this passage does not negate the necessity for all of those things. But I'm saying that so that people won't, who are watching this online, who maybe don't know who I am, they might say, well, I've only taught one side of something, because this is another side of that. Next slide, please. Closer. Check my battery. I can hear myself just fine.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Don't worry about your battery. So then what is life? It's more than food. Now, those of you who know me know that I'm a hunter. Did you get out, Paul? Did you get out hunting? Did you get anything? Excellent. What I like about hunting, even more than the meat that comes into the freezer at the end of the year, is I like the outdoors. And I like seeing the squirrels, I like seeing the coyotes, I like seeing the blue jays, I like seeing the deer, but I like the crows. And I was going to bring my crow call. You can be thankful I did forget my crow call today. But Jesus said, consider the ravens. Now this particular raven that you see here, this is an African raven, or an African crow. And as you can see, he's biracial. Now, I've seen crows in Africa, I've seen crows in India, I've seen crows in Ukraine, and I've seen crows here, and they're all a little teeny bit different, but they're all basically the same. They have different calls a little bit. A raven is a little bit bigger than our crows, but our crow is a raven. And so Jesus tells us that we should consider these birds, we should think about these birds. You know, the Bible talks a lot about different animals and their characteristics. Like, go to the ant, thou sluggard. In other words, so see how the ant works, make sure that your industry is as good, you know. See the ant that carries the great big thing back and shares it with his ant buddies back in the ant hive. Do they have hives? What do ants have? Colonies and hills. So consider the ravens. So let's talk about the ravens just for a little bit. Next slide. They neither sow nor reap. They have neither storehouse nor barn, yet God feeds them. How much more value are you than the birds? Now here I have in the middle picture a picture of our pantry. We store stuff up. We have, on the left there, we have about 20 things of homemade chili, 20 jars, and we got about 20 jars of turkey, and we've got about 20 jars of vegetable beef soup, and we've got all those plastic containers with every kind of cracker and cookie and potato chip and anything you could possibly want. On the top, we've got a great big thing of coffee and a great big thing of oatmeal and a great big thing of rice. And our freezer is absolutely, totally, and completely filled with venison and lamb and vegetables that we have grown in the summer. And in the bottom of this thing, we have all the tomatoes that we've canned. And so we store up all this stuff. We like it. It's not really cheaper than buying it at the store, but you know that your tomatoes are maggot-free when you do it yourself. And in early times, in the times of the Bible, if you wanted to eat, you better get out there and plant in the spring. It's a person that doesn't sow bountifully. If they don't sow their seed bountifully, they don't eat bountifully in the fall. He who sows sparingly will reap sparingly, the Bible says. And so the birds, they don't do that. They come and eat the seeds that you have sown. You know, we put one of our driveway areas back into grass last fall because we needed 3 cars when Ariel lived with us. Now she's got her own place. We don't need that third parking spot, so I brought in topsoil and I put grass seed on it so that it would grow in the springtime. And the birds came and they ate every bit of it. I'm going to have to reseed it in the spring. They stole my grass seed. God takes care of the birds. They don't have to sow. They don't have to reap. They don't have a pantry cupboard. They don't have a barn. But they eat. So here we have a guy who's harvesting there on the right-hand side at the end of the year. He's done his due diligence, and he's planted his field. And in the first century, that guy wouldn't be smiling. You know why? Because then he had to take that wheat, and he had to take it to the winnowing barn, and he had to stomp on the wheat, and he had to throw the chaff up in the air and let the wind blow it away. Then he had to grind the grain, and then he had to take the grain, mix it with water, and mix it with yeast. And he had to build a fire, and he had to bake bread. It was not like going down to Wegmans and buying Tuscan garlic bread. It was a lot of work just to eat a piece of bread. And the crows don't have to do it. They don't need garlic on their grain. Consider the ravens. They don't have a storehouse. You know, we work our whole lives and we put money away for when we get old, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if that is our life focus, we're kind of missing the point. Life is more than that. So don't take care for your life, and it doesn't mean don't save and don't invest. I'm not saying that at all, but what I'm saying is that there's more to life than that. Consider the ravens. This in the next slide here is this is an Indian raven from India. They're kind of annoying like our crows. They're a little bit bigger, and their beak is a little bit larger and wider, and they have a little bit different call. Did you ever see any videos on ravens on YouTube, on crows? Okay, I'll tell you about it. First of all, I want to point out that the prophet Elijah, who lived about 800 BC, he got into a bad place, and the queen was chasing him, wanting to kill him. And so he went and he hid in a cave, and the raven came and fed him. Now I wonder, what it could be. Did he grab a chipmunk off the side of the road that the car ran over? Or, what exactly did the raven feed Elijah? But the raven kept him alive while he was hiding from persecution in the cave. And I want to tell you a few things about crows and ravens. If one crow gets hurt, the whole flock becomes angry. They're very group-oriented. One time I was hunting turkeys, and I shouldn't tell you this because somebody will be mad at me, but I was hunting turkeys, no turkeys to be found, and I was playing with my crow call, and they're territorial, so if you call, they come in and say, what are you doing in our area? And I shot one. And all hell broke loose in the sky. They all started screaming at me and diving, and they take care of each other. I saw a crow in Florida when I was in Bible school back in somewhere in the late 70s, and it had a broken wing and a broken leg. And we lived on one of those little lakes in Lakeland, Florida. They call them lakes, we call them ponds. And there was a crow there with a broken leg and a broken wing, and the other crows were bringing food and feeding it. It couldn't walk, it couldn't fly, but they made sure that it ate. They're very smart birds. They feed each other. They make friends and enemies. You can actually have a pet crow if you provide something for the crow. We had 2 crows that lived at our house down here for many years. They're gone now. They only live like 12 years or so. And if you feed them, they could bring you shiny objects. Have you read this, Priscilla? They'll see something, and maybe they'll see a diamond ring or something sometime and bring it to you, or a coin. They bring anything, tin foil, stuff like anything that shines. If you're their friend, they'll bring you the present. They'll come and eat what you're giving them, but they'll bring you a present because they're your friend. On the other hand, if you become their enemy, you're their enemy for life. They can recognize the face of people, individual people. There's a video online or on YouTube of a guy in India who somebody had trapped a crow, and he was trying to let the thing out. And the other crows saw he was trying to let it out. They misinterpreted it. They thought he was trying to kill the other crow. And he did let the crow out, but that particular crow started dive bombing him whenever he went out. And I mean day after day after day, because they're territorial. They live right there. Every time the guy came out of his house, this crow would come out and dive bomb him. And then after some time, they say that other crows started doing it with him. He got other people to fight his battles, other crows to fight his battles for him. And no matter where the guy would go, the raven would come down and try to peck his head because he thought that he had done something to his friend. Maybe it was his kid, I don't know. Interestingly, my brother told me when we first started hunting this year, at the beginning of hunting season, the first day we had some gut piles laying there from the deer, and on the second day, he's my brother, he was on the stand, and a crow came down and landed on the gut pile, and it made a strange noise. And within a short period of time, all these other crows came and started eating. They have a special language. They talk to each other in a special language. Jesus said, consider the ravens. Now, they didn't have the ability to, look on YouTube and see all these cool things that ravens do, but we are told to look at the creation and to learn from it. And lastly, they can read traffic lights. I don't know if you've ever seen this, but Google it. It's a picture in a city, and cars are going, and there's a crosswalk there. And there's a piece of carrion, dead flesh, in the crosswalk that some cars hit. And as soon as the traffic light turns so that the cars stop, the crow flies down and begins to eat. And as soon as it turns green again, it flies up. And they show it do it 2 or 3 different times. They're smart enough to know how the traffic works. These are smart animals. They're not lazy, but they get their food in a different way than we do. So if we think we're going to be hungry, don't worry about it. Next slide. Can any of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your lifespan? Well, you can add an hour to your lifespan, maybe by exercising. You can redeem an hour of your lifespan by not doing something stupid for the hour and do something productive for the hour. But you can't add an hour. Most of the things that we worry about, we can't do anything about anyway. Am I right? They had sundials back in those days. What time is it? Well, they would look at the sun and see. Hours were different depending on what time of year it was, where the shadow would fall. I'm old enough to remember when the teachers in school, I went to the West Lake Road School down here for first grade, and she had hourglass. And she would be teaching, science for 1 hour, and she'd turn the hourglass over, and when the sand ran out of the hourglass, then it'd be time to do reading. That's how old I am. This is my clock here that's ticking away. It was made by Silas Hoadley in 1830 out of wood, and it's still ticking. And Hoadley's son died, and his grandson died, and his great-grandson died, and his great-great-grandson died. And however many generations you get between an adult in 1830 and a child in 2023, generation after generation after generation of people, that clock is still ticking. But the people have passed. And nobody, by worrying, can add an hour. A lot of clocks said tempus fugit on it, which means time flies. A lot of times you'll see an old clock in it. This clock doesn't say that, but most old clocks do. Okay, next slide, skip it over. I already talked about that. Go to the lilies. Consider the lilies. Now, this can mean really any kind of flower. And that, we have our daylilies, and we have our tiger lilies, and what are those lilies you got in the back in the creek there, those yellow things? What are those? Water lilies. They have all kinds of flowers, and so the scholars think that this could mean any kind of wildflower. Consider the lilies, how they grow. We have the ability to see the time-lapse photography, and, they put the seed in, and the plant pops up, a little sprout, and then the flower bud comes up and it opens and the bees fly in and pollinate it. We can do that. They had to watch it in slow-mo. Consider the lilies. Not even Solomon in all his glory was not clothed like one. Now you have to understand that they had no color. The only color they had was purple. And the only people that could afford to have purple clothes were kings. Because in order to get the dye to make your garment purple, you had to take oyster shells. You know how you get the mother of pearl, you look at the shell and it's got all those little colors in it, it's got purple in it. They had to crush those things down, and enough of them to get that color purple out of those shells and then dip the clothing into it to make it purple. Everybody wore drab clothing. The only thing that they could wear linen if they had money, or almost everybody wore wool. So you can imagine, have you ever put wool on your bare skin? We can't even relate to it because, by the way, that's okay if he makes a little noise. We don't care. You understand? I want you to understand you don't have to take the baby out. Just feel at ease. So they couldn't have any color, but imagine what it would be like to have to make those clothes. Here it says, Solomon in all his glory was not clothed like a flower. He didn't have any color except for purple. And here I have a passage from Chronicles, 800 years BC. King Solomon's drinking vessels were gold, and the vessels of the house of the forest, that was his house, were gold. And silver was not considered valuable in the days of Solomon. This guy was the richest guy probably that ever lived. He was the king of all the Middle East, and everybody was a vassal state to him, and everybody had to bring tribute to him. And they came and the Queen of Sheba came and brought loads of gold and spices and all kinds of things to pay tribute to him. He was really, really, really super rich. And Jesus says that the flowers were dressed better than he was. Well, let's talk about this a little bit. Next slide. This is my closet. Can't see it very well, but up on the door there I have about 55 ties. I put up on a marketplace, anybody who wants ties, come and get them, and I gave away like 100 ties because people think that I need ties. I don't need any ties. Garlic bread, yes. Ties, no. I have on the end there, I have all my slacks, and on the side you can't really see them. There's 2 suits on this side in cases. There's 2 suits on this side, and in the middle I have my winter shirts, and then farther over I have my flannel shirts for hunting, and farther over I have my Hawaiian shirts. I got like 10 or 15 of each of those. My closet downstairs, I got my fire police jacket, I got my Cheshire Fire Department blue jacket, I got my leather jacket, I've got my jacket that says International Order of Police Chaplains. Do I have anything else? Oh yeah, I've got my camo jacket. How many of you got closets like, there's not a piece of Sean's clothing in that closet. She has her own and it's just as obscene. Just as obscene with the amount. We've been such a blessed time. Imagine you lived in the 1st century and you had some sheep and you had to get the sheep and shear the sheep without electric shears. And then you had to take the wool and you had to spin it into thread, and then you had to put it in the loom and put all the threads in this way, and then you had to take threads and put them in this way and put it through, and then you had to take a board which had a finger in between each thread this way and push it up, and then put the next one in and push it up to make cloth. Nobody had very many clothes in the 1st century. If you had 2 sets of clothes, you were rich. That's why Jesus said, let him who has 2 coats give it to one who has none. Because that's how poor they were. And they certainly needed to worry when a baby was born. They needed to worry how they were going to make the cloth to clothe the baby. And so these are, 18th century spinning wheel there on the left and the loom on the right. I mean, these are modern conveniences compared to what things were in the first century. So they had to do a lot of work just to make one shirt or one piece of clothing. Jesus had an unusual piece of clothing in that it had no seam. And when they crucified him, they said, let's not tear that up, because ordinarily the people who did the executions, they would take the clothes and they would tear them up, and everybody would get a little piece of cloth, and they would have a washcloth or something like that from the executed criminals. But Jesus had one that had no seam in it. That meant that it was woven in a very strange way. It was woven on a circle somehow. And so they gambled for it. So who can understand in 21st century America, don't worry about what you eat or what you wear? It's foreign to us. But that's not what life is about. To us, it's, do you have Gucci on it? Or, what is the famous designer that made your dress? These Hollywood people show up, well, they're wearing such and such a dress, and put some clothes on. That'd be a good idea in the 21st century, too. Next slide, please. But if God so clothes the grass of the field, which is alive and tomorrow's thrown into the oven, how much more will he clothe you? God is going to take care of you because he knows that you need to eat, and he knows that you need clothes. And we need you to have clothes on. We don't want to see that. And do not keep striving. This word in Greek, the scholars tell me, is a word that is used for a boat that is in danger of capsizing on the sea. When people go up to Lake Ontario to go fishing, they don't go when there is a small craft advisory, which is when the waves get to a certain height, you begin to stress out. And so if people are getting that kind of stress over ordinary life, they're not getting that kind of stress over a storm that's come up on the sea. They're worried about what they're going to eat. They're worried about how they're going to pay their heat bill. They're worried about how they're going to have enough gas to get to work. They're worried about getting new tires. I mean, there are things that people worry about, which are, first world problems and 21st century problems. Don't worry. The nations of the world strive after all these things, and your Father knows that you need them. Who's to say which side is up? In Australia, they think their side is up. But all the map makers historically have been on this side of the equator, and so they've got the world showing from their perspective. But there's another perspective to the world that other people have that we don't, and this is what the world looks like to them. And where do we live? Yeah, way in the bottom corner over here. God knows. The Gentiles, they spend their lives. We are Gentiles. Gentile is not a term of derision that the Jews use. It simply means non-Jew, non-religious person. The non-religious people of the world, they strive about what they're going to have to eat tonight, whether they're going to have McDonald's or a buffet. I was just telling Caleb this morning, not Caleb, I guess I was telling Tally about somebody that was begging from him. And one day after church, the phone rang here, and the guy said, I need some food. And I said, okay, I'll meet you down at Wendy's. This was a lot of years ago. And I'll buy you food. This is right after church. And he said, I can't eat at Wendy's. Why not? I got to have, and he named a restaurant. And I said, if you're hungry, come to Wendy's. No, I can't eat that. Never mind. See, Eli? Okay, so somebody I was talking to about this. You know, we are taught, Lord, give us this day our daily bread. So we are taught to pray for our food day by day. But that is not what life is. Life is more than that. God knows. And it's almost like God is saying, although we can't say it because we are taught to pray for our daily bread, but it's almost like saying, why even bother to pray about this because God is so good he already knows. I mean, the prayer has to be for our benefit so that we can be thankful. But he knows that we need something to eat. He knows that we need money to pay our electric bill. He knows that we need money for our kids for Christmas and so forth. And then the next verse says, and strive for the kingdom of God. It says in Matthew, seek his kingdom first, and all this other stuff will fall into line. All these other things will be added to you. It's a proper focus. We are children of the King. We are children of God. We are people who God planned to exist way, way, way back. He's planned to take care of us. And we don't need to worry about ordinary things in life because he is going to take care of us. That is what a proper focus is. And don't be afraid, little flock. It's your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. First, the kingdom. But don't even worry about that because he's already given it to you. And there we'll stop. Who has something to add to this? Don does. Wait for the mic, please.
Yeah, you were talking about the ravens and the crows there. When I was a kid, I had 2 crows for a pet.
Did you? Did they bring you presents?
Yes. Yeah, I had every Matchbox car in the neighborhood. If you were looking for something that was shiny, you had to come over to my house to find it.
That is so cool.
Somebody in New York City does that. He needs a bunch of crows, and they all bring in the coins that are on the streets in New York City.
Yeah, my mom didn't think it was too good, though, when she was setting a picnic table up for lunch one day, and they were flying away with the silverware.
Taking it to their other friend.
Yeah, so. While you tried to feed them as much natural food as possible, pollywogs was really a lifesaver for me because you could catch them by the bucket load. And if you ran out of food, the best thing was canned dog food because it has added minerals and vitamins and everything like that.
Thanks for telling us about that. That is really cool. You can read about it, but when somebody actually has experienced it firsthand is nice. Who else? Don't worry. Be happy. Well, I'm out of time, so if you don't have anything else to say, I'm going to say God bless you. Have a great day. Don't forget, those of you who are members, 2 weeks from today, our annual meeting.